Hello and welcome to Dayan Explains. It's me, Dayan. You know, people usually think that it's pretty obvious what's alive and what's not. What is life? What's an organism? Are they the same thing? There is actually a lot of debate in the scientific community about what life is and what constitutes an organism. This matters to Christians too, because of something they seem to ignore out of convenience these days. But it's been long held that all living organisms have individual souls. I have recently changed my mind on exactly what life is, but not what has a soul. Let me explain why. On a day-to-day basis, it usually seems pretty obvious what's alive and what isn't. I mean, a cat, as long as it can still purr, is alive. A tree, even though it may not be able to purr, we still consider alive too. How about a single-celled organism, like algae and bacteria? I think everyone agrees that they are alive. Okay then, how about viruses? This is where things start to get into a little bit of a gray area. The answer depends on who you ask. There are generally two camps. They aren't alive, and they are alive. I sort of used to kind of straddle the middle between the two. And no, not like Schrodinger's cat from my 5th and 6th videos. My position was that a virus was only alive when it had infected a cell and was actively replicating. So, people who have an active infection like coronavirus have a live coronavirus in them. But when they sneeze, they are releasing non-living coronavirus. I use the word non-living instead of dead because dead implies it was once alive and is now dead. Most scientists today fall into the second category, that viruses are just complex machines and sometimes just simple machines that replicate using the machinery of living organisms. Then you have NASA's definition of life, a self-sustained chemical system capable of undergoing Darwinian evolution. By that definition, a virus could be considered life. People might want to heckle with the self-sustained bit, but I'll get into that in a minute. Now recently I've rethought this a little bit. Once a virus enters a cell, also known as infecting the cell, it breaks apart and releases its genetic material, and usually some enzymes. These take advantage of the cell's machinery to start building new virus particles. It dawned on me that the virus is gone by the time this happens. The cell it infected is still alive, although, depending on the virus, it may not be for long. So it seems to me I got things backwards. The virus particles are life, and the life ceases when they enter the cell and break apart. Now this brings us back to the self-sustained definition. Many people argue that viruses aren't self-sustaining because they require the machinery of a cell to replicate. However, if you think about it, the inside of a cell is just the environment a virus needs in order to replicate. Botflies need a host, and everyone would agree they are alive. The fact that there is a near complete pause in chemical activity between cycles of replication doesn't matter. Or frogs that freeze in the winter and thaw out and revive in the spring would also not be alive. So yeah, now I think viruses are alive. However, this goes on to the next part. Are they an organism? For that, I'd say no, even though some people have described them as organisms at the edge of life. An organism is defined as something that has a metabolism. If a virus ceases, aka dies, when it falls apart after entering the cell, then the only metabolizing it's doing when it's dead. are there other things that could be considered alive but not an organism? Yes, because there are two kinds of organisms: single-celled organisms and multi-celled organisms. Single-celled organisms check all the boxes. They have metabolisms, are chemical systems, and can evolve from generation to generation. Multi-celled organisms also check all the boxes as well, obviously. However, what about an individual cell from a multi-celled organism? It has a metabolism. However, it is sustained and evolves through the community of cells that make up the multicellular organism as a whole. So the cells that make up multi-celled organisms really aren't individual organisms themselves. Going back to viruses for a moment, this is also one more point in their favor as being alive. Since cells that make up an organism are all considered alive, even when they aren't part of a body, but almost completely rely on other cells to survive and reproduce, just like a virus. You may be asking yourself at this point, well, doesn't that mean at one point I wasn't an organism because I was a single cell? Well, no, you were still an organism, just a single-celled one. You still checked all the boxes for an organism, but becoming multicellular is part of the whole process. So, to put it simply, an organism is one living individual. I mentioned earlier that not all scientists agree with what is life and what isn't, what's an organism and what isn't. So what's the minimum criteria all credible scientists accept? For life, it's anything that is made of at least one functioning cell. So that excludes viruses, but includes bacteria all the way on up to us. So now I'd like to touch on the religious aspects of this as it pertains to Christians, and the reason why what is alive and what is an organism is important. Christians have historically considered all living organisms to have a soul. Now, not necessarily a soul like ours. Our souls are immortal and after they are created will exist forever. Other organisms are considered to have a mortal soul, one that comes into existence when their first cell forms and ends when their body stops functioning. This actually holds for plants and even single-celled things like bacteria, because they are living organisms. So having a soul doesn't necessarily mean they have self-awareness like our soul imparts on us. I'm going to do more videos on other aspects of the soul in the future, but it seems kind of weird for animals and even plants to have a soul. We will find out when we meet God, but I for one still don't think viruses have souls because they are living processes rather than organisms. However, for Christians, it's an important key thing to define if something is living or non-living. Now, I know that doesn't seem too important since God gave us everything in this world to use, and it's just fine to chop down a tree for firewood or to kill a chicken for food. It is important for this, though. It appears many self-identified Christians don't accept the minimum of a living organism, even when secular scientists do. If God gives souls to even bacteria when they become individual organisms, whose soul did He give you when you were also a single-celled organism? If you like this video, please press the like button. Subscribe to my channel and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon, link in the description. The more people who support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.